Welcome to Keep What You Earn, your judgment and jargon-free zone for entrepreneurs of all levels. Get ready to learn how to scale your business, save money in taxes, and create a business that grows your wealth. If it feels like the financial side of business is like eating your vegetables, well, then think of this podcast as the ranch dressing to make the process a little more enjoyable. My name is Shannon Weinstein. I'm a CPA and business owner on a mission to simplify money and empower others through knowledge. I hope this episode inspires you to take action, but remember that the information we share is for educational purposes only and is not individual tax advice. Now that we got that out of the way, let's start the show. So I decided to call this episode 3 Things You Need to Know Before Buying a Business. And in reality, there are 3 bajillion things you need to know before buying a business. But to simplify it for you, if you are looking at acquiring a business, even if you are looking at, starting a new business, entering into a franchise, or you're just presented with an opportunity here, you can apply these 3 things. So even if you're not in the market to acquire a business, I encourage you to listen to this because this is also something that if you're in the market to eventually sell your business, you could easily flip this 180 degrees and say, this is what I should be focusing on in order to make my business marketable. So let's dive in. At a very high level, these 3 components are the 3 Ps. So the things that you need to be focusing on if you want to buy a business, if you want to transact a business, are people, process, and profit. Let's talk about people. Who's on the team? And if we're putting ourselves in the position where we're buying a business, remember this entire episode, I'm going to be on that side of the transaction. So from that perspective, if I'm looking at the people, I would say, okay, who is the captain of the ship? Who is running the show here? Who is managing the operations day to day? And if it is the owner, then we have a possible problem or red flag here, because if the owner is the duct tape holding the whole thing together, you rip that out when you buy the business and you could end up with not that much left over. So you want to know, how reliant is the business on the owner to do or direct everything? And even though they may not be doing everything, you have to ask yourself, what are the degree of touch points that the teams are having with the founder, and asking questions that are at the, level 1 question. So I'll use Jason's business as an example because we were just talking about this. Jason ran a basement waterproofing and foundation repair company for 17 years. And I would consider a level 1 question to be something where one of his techs is in the field asking a question about a sump pump or asking a question about a warranty. They can call 3 different people before they call Jason. But sometimes they would call Jason because they just knew they would get the fastest response from him, and he's the most knowledgeable. So if that were always the approach and there were not those people in between to call, and let's say Jason were the only person they could call in this instance, well, it would have made his business a lot harder to sell, because then he would become essential to the day-to-day operations of the business, and removing him would decrease the value significantly. So what you don't want to do is buy a ship that has holes in it. You don't want to buy a lemon. So to make sure you're getting your money's worth and you're going to have a value growth business, you have to make sure that you're in place with really strong people to support the vision. The people also have to be aligned with the company's vision and mission, and also be committed to working there. I think that when you have certain businesses, you're not going to have everybody gung-ho cheerleader for the business, but you will have some folks, and you will have some folks who are, we'll say, more transactional, more like, I show up, I do my job, I get my paycheck, I go home. I'm not that emotionally invested, and that's fine. But you want to understand the breakdown of that team, who is fundamentally replaceable, who has high potential, what the compensation structures look like. You want to know what the market value is for that team and if they're being paid that. You really have to understand the dynamic a bit more about the people. And I say that's one of the most important factors in buying a business. And I think it's probably the more overlooked one. I think this one is the least considered, or it's the one people brush off and say, well, we can work with that later. Like, the people are the people. Yes, but they do make a big difference in how that business will run post exit. So you have to make sure that you fully understand what you're getting yourself into. Number 2 is process. So I've talked about this several times on the show before, but systems and processes, I cannot speak enough about the importance of those. And having recipes to follow is key. So again, I'll go back to Jason's example because I got to see him through his exit. And, he spent a ridiculous amount of time recording Loom videos and training libraries. And not just when he was about to sell and had the contract in hand, but the months, even the years leading up to the sale, he knew that, okay, I have to make this business sellable or I have to become big enough where I can compete with the company that would have bought me. So if that's the case, if you're at that point where you're like, we'll say $4 to $5 million in revenue ish, and you're thinking, "Ugh, I'm in my industry and I need to either compete enough to defeat Goliath or I need to be tasty enough for him to eat me." You kind of have those two choices because you won't really survive as a small to medium sized business in certain industries without one of those two outcomes. And you have to commit to which one you think you're going to follow. But here's the cool thing, without even committing to those two options, both of them start with the same solution, which is if you want to make your business more sellable, you need SOPs, systems and processes, and really clear sets of expectations. In order to grow and scale to the level of that Goliath, guess what you need? SOPs, systems and processes, and really clear expectations. Because you also need to grow and lather, rinse, repeat what you've already been doing and be able to train people at scale. So, regardless, you need this stuff. And having really solid processes in place is going to help you a ton. It's going to help you a ton. And how do you actually do that? Well, you have to start documenting the how behind everything you do. You have to start with maybe the who, then what they do, and then how they do it. Start that and formulate an SOP. Ask your team. We've been doing this. Courtney's been doing this for us, and it's been awesome. Is every week she asks the team to contribute to the SOP with something they did this week. So we're adding up to this huge library that's even searchable in Asana, a library of Loom videos, documents, templates, and so on that will help aid people going forward in their tasks and be able to cross train. So this is huge, but this has to happen for us to be able to even have the first iteration of these SOPs. And here's the thing, the SOPs, it's not some massive ass Google Doc. It is not some complicated spreadsheet. It's in Asana, which is what our MO is. Like Asana is our first place we go to for anything. So for you, that might be, I don't know, it could be Slack. It could be Google Docs. It could be Word. It could be anything. It could be email. It doesn't matter. Whatever you typically use the most to manage what it is you do and share expectations and share the how behind what you do, use that. We love Loom videos. There's plenty of there's like Trainual and a couple of other resources that are out there. We haven't used them personally. We've heard of them, but we find a really good rhythm in just doing what we already do, which is Asana and Loom. And you can always make the next evolution of it later. But do what you're doing now, capture it, because who knows, you may need it sooner than you think. But you also just having that and just articulating to a potential buyer that, you have these systems and processes in place is key. Now, again, if we're on the side of the transaction where we're buying a business, we need to ask, what are the systems and processes? Where are they stored? How are they shared? Do you have a really clear employee and client onboarding and offboarding process? Can I see what that looks like? Now, again, if you're buying a business, typically this will be under NDA, non-disclosure agreement, and you may not be able to peek under the hood per se. You have to take their word for it, but ask these types of provoking questions so you can understand exactly what you're getting yourself into. And lastly, we have profit. You know that I was not going to cover all of this without going through the numbers. So let's dig in. People, process, profit. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that they have a couple of things in place. They need to have good bookkeeping. So that's part of it. I would consider that part of process, but they have to have good bookkeeping in place and really clear data so that you can consume it. And what you want to look at is their profit and loss statement. And here are a couple of things you want to look at. You want to look at gross margin and you want to look at net margin. Other words for this are gross profit and net profit. Net profit is also known as net income. I know, jargon, but the bottom number on a P&L. So when you look at that number, you want to be looking, are they profitable? Are they profitable? And you also want to strip away, and this is a really key thing here. You need to look at the expenses and see, are there any expenses that are technically personal to the owner? Are there any expenses that will go away once I buy the business? And are there any expenses that will come in once I buy the business? So if you're buying the business, but then you're hiring 3 people, well, we have to factor that in. And you want to have a good idea of how much this business is going to cost you, what that cash flow is going to look like to buy it. Are you going to pay it all down up front? Are you going to have over time? Are you going to finance it? Are you going to seller finance it? All of these are options on the table. But you want to make sure that the business can produce a profit as soon as possible. You want it to be a humming profit machine already. If you have followed Cody Sanchez's content, she's known for business acquisitions. And she specifically uses an example that she used to make her, I don't know if it was her first million, but I know she's set up a business that makes over $1 million that owns laundromats. And laundromats are killer because they're profit machines, because they have already been making profit. Changing ownership does not really adversely affect the operations of that type of business. So when you're thinking about the disruption that a purchase might have and the new leadership and new management changes, you have to consider, okay, how is that going to impact the profit? And will that be something that I can tolerate? So as you're thinking about buying a business, I would say get out a piece of paper and go through the fundamental questions of people, process, and profit. Where is the room for opportunity in each of these areas? What questions can I be asking the owner? And how can I inspect to see that they have these elements in place? So again, if you're buying a business, definitely look at these things. But if you are running a business that you think could be sellable one day, that's your hack. Cover your bases on people, process, and profit. And I promise you, you will be much better off being able to sell your business, or at least have the choice of whether you want to or not. Thanks for joining me on today's episode. I'll see you soon. Okay, real talk. Our business can really mess with our emotions and our mindset. Am I right? One day we feel like we're unstoppable, like we could run through a wall, and then the next we want to burn it all down and start from scratch. Hey, I'm with you. A lot of this has to do with how we approach our money. And if you need a quick jolt of mindset habits for the next 5 days to help you reboot and recalibrate, check out my 5-day financial mindset refresh delivered straight to your email. Click the link in the show notes to sign up right now. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and review on your podcast platform. This small action goes a long way for podcasters to get our message heard by more business owners just like you. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to information about our guests and ways to get in touch with me. We'll see you on the next episode.